Hello everyone, it's Channin here for Hero Arts. In today's video, we are going to create this card featuring the January 2022 My Monthly Hero Kit. This kit includes a layering stamp set, and today I'm going to share with you one of my favorite techniques for getting more depth and creating even more realism out of your layering stamp sets. We're going to start today's card by stamping the branch. The branch image has 4 stamps to create the image. We're going to start with the base for the leaves. You can tell the base because it has the least amount of detail. It's the more solid stamp. So I positioned it here over a A2 panel of Dove White cardstock, and I'm going to stamp this, but I'm going to ink my stamp up a little bit differently. I'm going to use these blending brushes to partially ink, so just inking up different sections of this stamp with different reactive ink colors. I'm starting with Taffy here, a really pretty pink. And then after I've inked up, I basically inked up 3 different sections of this stamp with that, then I'm going to move on to my next shade, which is Fruit Punch, and ink up the remaining open areas. Now by inking it up with your blending brush, you're going to create a really soft gradation or soft transition between your colors, and it's a great way to get a subtle change over the stamped image, and the subtle gradation really does make this image have a more realistic look and definitely adds more interest and depth. So I stamped it once, and now I'm just going to repeat. So I'm starting again with Taffy, and I'm inking up the areas that I inked up with Taffy before. I'm inking them up again, and then the areas that I inked up with Fruit Punch, I'm inking that up again. And then I stamped it again, this just to make it a little bit more bright, the color more intense. So now we're moving on to the detail layer for the leaves, and I've just positioned it over that stamped image and picked it up with my Misty, and now we're going to ink this up in a little bit more traditional style, just with the ink pad directly to the stamp. I'm starting with Rose Madder, which is a dark pink, and I'm inking up the stamp with that pink in the same areas that I inked up with Taffy, so pink with pink. Now I moved on to Crimson, which is a red, and inking up the areas that I stamped in Fruit Punch with that crimson, and now I'm stamping it. This detail layer is really going to make this image start to pop and really get those leaves to look more realistic. So after I stamp that a couple of times, now I'm going to move on to the branch. Here I'm just inking up and stamping it one more time, a little section to get more contrast. So now onto the branch. Now the branch actually has 2 layers, a base and a detail. I'm only going to use the detail today because I want this to look kind of like a birch or a really light colored wood. So after I positioned it, I picked it up with my Misty, and I'm going to stamp this detail layer in Fog, a really pretty kind of gray color. After I stamp that, my image is done, and I'm ready to die cut this out. The kit includes the matching die, so I'm just going to grab it here, center it over my stamped image. Once I get it in place, I'll grab a couple pieces of low tack tape to hold it in place, and I'll run it through my die cutting machine. I'll pop it out here, and we have this beautiful branch, kind of like a weeping willow sort of look. It's really going to help to create our little scene. So I went ahead and repeated this process and created a second branch and die cut that out. And now we're going to move on to the swing and sentiment. So I've grabbed these from the included stamp set, positioned them onto a scrap of Dove White cardstock, applied some anti-static powder, and now I'm inking them up in Embossing and Watermark ink and going to stamp them. I'm going to do some heat embossing, of course, so I've dipped it into some some gold embossing powder, and now I'm going to heat set with my heat tool. After I've heat set this, I went ahead and die cut the swing out with the matching die, but for the sentiment I'm going to fussy cut this out. So I'm just going to leave a little border similar to how the die cuts a little border around your image. I'm going to leave a little border around the sentiment. So I quickly fussy cut that, and now we're ready to create our background. So I have an A2 top folding white card base made out of Dove White cardstock. I'm going to start ink blending with Taffy Reactive ink, and I'm going to do this really light. I'm going to create a really light kind of covering of this taffy and have it a little bit even lighter in the center and a little bit darker towards the edges. Once I get kind of that base done with the taffy, I'll move on to Fruit Punch, and again, really light with this Fruit Punch, just do the very edges or sides of this card front, just add a little bit of contrast, and that will actually complete my ink blending. Now I wanted to add a little bit more of I wanted to create a little bit more of an ethereal look. I just create a little bit more of a setting, so I did splatter some water on just by using my brush, dipping my brush into the water and tapping my finger on the brush to create some water spots. Then I picked up the water with a towel, and that actually completes that background. But my towel was a little bit dirty, unfortunately, so I made a little spot on my card base, but luckily my die cut images are going to cover that up. So once the card front was dry, I was ready to arrange my images. So I took all my die cuts and kind of created my little scene. And once I had everything in the right spot, I grabbed a piece of press and seal, picked up the branches and the swing, and then I flipped them over so I could add some foam adhesive. And I'm just going to add fairly large strips of foam adhesive all over this back, all over the branches anyways, and then cut some really thin ones obviously for the swing. So I removed the backing. I'm going to position it here on the card front. Once I get that place, I'll just remove the press and seal. And then the last thing we have to stick down is that sentiment. Now that sentiment does hang off the branch a little bit, so I doubled up the foam adhesive here so I could really stabilize and really support that sentiment. Just removed the backing on that last little piece of foam adhesive and then stuck that sentiment down, and that actually completes my card. I'll hold it to the camera here so you can get a good look at all the details in this card, because there are a lot of subtle details thanks to that beautiful gradation, the depth added with just the layering stamp sets themselves, and that really pretty soft background. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.